So you're a records manager or perhaps an IT manager, and you've been asked to understand, learn, and deploy and implement Purview Records Management. So how's that going? How's your learning curve going? Have you gone to YouTube and perhaps you've looked at several YouTube videos? I have, and what I've noticed is that most of these YouTube videos on Purview Records Management is nothing more than what we call feature tours. They just walk you through all the features and what it can do. But what the heck is a preservation copy and what's an adaptive scope? Auto apply policies and activity explorer, crawl properties. What the heck has that got to do with records management? Have you looked up the Microsoft official documentation for Purview Records Management online? How's that been treating you? It's pretty technical and can be pretty confusing at times. So if you find it difficult to get your head wrapped around Purview RM, then you've come to the right place because here we know records and we know the proper way to deploy and utilize Purview. So my name is Bruce Miller. I'm with RIMtech Consulting, and all I have ever done in my entire career is electronic record keeping. I've written 2 books on Microsoft records keeping and kept up with the technology through the generations. I've invented the world's first electronic record keeping software, and I have won a few awards, and I do a lot of teaching and education. So, and I've been doing it for 30 years. That's all I do. Electronic record keeping. It's all I have done, and all I likely will do. Either way, all I'm trying to tell you is that I really know records keeping well, and I know the features that we need to see in Purview RM. So I'm not here to sell you any software. I'm here to educate you and to show you what are its good features, what are its bad features, and how do you make this thing actually work for you. So first of all, what exactly does compliance mean? Well, it means that every document in SharePoint conforms to or adheres to or complies with the retention schedule. So a document about an expense report will have a rule attached to it that says expense reports are to be kept for 2 years after the report's submitted and then destroyed. If the document were about fleet vehicle maintenance, it might say in the retention schedule, well, for records about fleet vehicle maintenance, keep them for 5 years after the end of life of the vehicle, then destroy. So that's what compliance means, is that everything in SharePoint conforms or adheres to the retention schedule. So how do we make that happen? Well, you need an EDRMS, and an EDRMS is a marriage of 2 completely and utterly different technologies. SharePoint is your enterprise content management system, fancy marketing talk for document management platform. That's where your documents live. Purview, on the other hand, is a separate piece of software that applies record keeping rules to the documents in SharePoint. So you're basically injecting Purview into SharePoint. And when you do that, it completely changes how you deploy and configure and set up SharePoint. So even though record keeping is only a small part of what users are doing, it colors it. It makes it very, very different. The whole experience is different. So Purview is completely separate from SharePoint. Know this, SharePoint does not manage records and it never will. You have to use Purview or some other product like it, but we're here to talk about Purview. You have to use Purview to apply record keeping to the content of SharePoint. It's a completely separate piece of software. And you know what? It's not meant to be seen or used by end users whatsoever, strictly by the records person or administrator. So in fact, you have to mash together 3 different things in order to do an EDRMS. And that is your retention schedule, the Purview Records Management software, and SharePoint. Okay? You have to bring all 3 together. And that's no small feat, believe me. So a little bit about Purview in general. The product is fairly new to the market, and it's made by Microsoft, and Microsoft is big on compliance. Now, you can think of Purview as a bowling ball of features for compliance, Inside that bowling ball is rattling around an imaginary golf ball. The golf ball is the records management. It's only a portion of Purview, but all of Purview is all about compliance. So when I say compliance in in Purview, I mean records management compliance. So does Purview do everything you need it to do for record keeping? Yes, it does. But it does it the way that Microsoft wants it done, not the way we're used to it. So records management in Purview is very much Microsoft's interpretation of and deployment of record keeping. It's pretty foreign to us. It's also incorporates an entirely new language, such as trainable classifiers and refinable strings. There's a whole new language you're going to have to master for it. How technical is it? Very technical. I think Purview is sufficiently technical that you will need help from IT in order to successfully deploy it. It's not likely you can succeed without that. That's very different than most other pieces of record keeping software out there, but it's true. So know this is that Purview is not a piece of software like most, where you simply purchase it, install it, and run it. It doesn't work like that. It's a platform, a set of compliance features, never seen by end users. In other words, it's plumbing. It's behind the drywall, so to speak. Um, it is invisible, and you have to apply it in the background to the content of SharePoint. Now, uh, Purview record keeping has some good features and some bad features, and you're going to have to avoid some of the bad features and work around some of the not so great features. And occasionally, in certain circumstances, namely high scale, you might have to actually spend some money to customize it to make it work for you. Okay, so that's the story of what it's going to be like to deploy Purview record keeping. Now, there are two technologies you have to learn. The first is SharePoint. And know this, you cannot hope to understand or utilize or deploy Purview record keeping without knowing SharePoint really well. The good news is that there's only 6 aspects of SharePoint you have to know, and here they are. Only those 6. The bad news is you have to know those 6 to an administrator level. And by that, I mean you have to know these 6 capabilities every bit as well as your IT person. Okay? So you have to know how to create libraries and all the aspects of libraries and so forth for each of the 6. Now, that won't be enough. Once you know that, you've got to learn these 9 features of Purview, and you have to know them again 100% without any compromise. Okay, so these are the 9 features, and some of these features are buried deeply inside the plumbing of Purview. Okay, so we'll cover each of these later, but for now, just know that this is a second learning curve you have to be on, a second one. You have to really get your head inside Purview itself and understand it, learn it, and speak its language. Look at number 4. KQL stands for Keyword Query Language. That's not a programming language, but it's kind of like a programming language. You have to learn it, you have to know how it works, and you have to get it right each and every time in order to do event-based retention inside Purview. So let's talk a bit about compliance in and of itself. Where does compliance come from? Well, there are 2 schools of thought. One says it comes from end users. End users should be able to choose the retention rules of their liking and apply them to documents of their liking. Why not? Some organizations would even have that embedded in or enshrined in their policies. You, as a creator of a document, are the owner of that document, and therefore you have a implicit responsibility to apply the appropriate retention rule to it. Where do the retention rules come from? From the retention schedule. But you know what? Most people have never seen the retention schedule, and most of them don't even care about it. Okay. So what I'm finding after 30 years in this business is that most end users could not be bothered with this. Many haven't even seen the retention schedule in years and years and years. So there's a risk here, okay? What is the risk? Well, if I take one document and I give it to 10 random end users and I ask them, is this a record? And then I ask them, if it's a record, where does it belong in the retention schedule? Show me where it occurs in the retention schedule so I can get the appropriate rule. You know what happens? Out of those 10 users, I'll probably get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different answers, sometimes 10 different answers. Not only that, but if I wait a month or 6 months or a year and I ask exactly the same question, I'll get different answers. This is a huge challenge. We can't have users doing this incorrectly. And remember, they're poorly motivated. They don't ever have a risk of their jobs if they don't do it, and they see it as overhead work. Okay, so the relying on users is almost a certain failure because users will not put the effort, time, and care into this to get it right. So that leads us to the second school of thought on compliance, which is, okay, that being the case, where does compliance really come from? It comes from the organization as represented by the records manager, right? We impose these retention rules on users, whether they like it or not. That way, not only are we imposing the correct rules, but we're not relying on the users to pick the correct rules. We're not relying on their goodwill or their effort or their skill or their capability. We're not relying on it at all. This is the way we need to do it. So I'm here to tell you that the only successful way to deploy Purview Records Management or any other records management software for that matter is to impose it on the users, not the other way around. Do not make this mistake. Do not leave it up to the users to pick retention rules. Just let's not go there because it has never worked and it will never will. The bad news is that that's the way Purview works out of the box. So Purview's stance, if you will, is compliance comes from end users. So unless you change it, if you just run Purview the way it was intended to be installed and operated, that's the hurt locker you're going to be in and you will fail. That's a promise, okay? So don't go there. We do not want compliance to come from end users. It's a certain failure. So this video tutorial is going to introduce 14 features of Purview Records Management that I think you need to know to get your head truly wrapped around it and truly understand it. So, but it's at a high level. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be releasing one video per week with the details of each of these 14 topics. So I'm inviting you to join our email list, and if you do, we will notify you each week of the upcoming video for that topic, and it will be live. And it'll be generally 1 to 2 hours in duration. And it will get into the level of detail you need to actually work with the software and deploy it. This is not public. You can only see these by joining the email list. And if you miss the live session, we'll send you the recorded session. So either way, you don't need to miss any of the 14. As an alternative, if you're, if you have a more urgent need to deploy Purview, then may I suggest you subscribe to our training, which takes you through all 14 and much more in great detail. But for now, I'm assuming that we're just going to take 14 weeks and see each of these 14 features. Now, for the rest of this video, I'm going to walk you through each of the 14 at a very high level so that by the end, you'll have a good end-to-end understanding of Purview Records Management. We're going to take you out of the dark, so to speak. So, number 1 of 14. First, right away, let's get this done. Don't let end users drive records management. Do not. Purview Records Management has 4 strong competitors in the market. They have others as well, but these are the 4 that I encounter most often. And those 4 companies and products have learned automation is the only way to go. They don't really do user-forward presentation of records. It's all done in the background automatically. Purview, out of the box, is the opposite. It puts it in the end user's hands. Fortunately, Purview does allow us to automate, so we have to use that automation within it. We're going to not do the end user approach. Number two, you have a retention schedule, right? Everyone does, but it won't work. It will not work with Purview, period. Why not? Well, number one is because it has to be machine readable in order for Purview to understand it and act on it. Remember, we're going to automate record keeping. That means we're taking users out of the equation. When users are out of the equation, that means that we're relying entirely on Purview to automatically assign correct retention rules from the retention schedule. And in order to do that, it has to be instructed with specific rules. And those rules are rules that you have to create inside Purview. Okay, so the instructions in the retention schedule cannot be ordinary English language sentences like we're used to. They have to be machine readable. They have to be in a spreadsheet, and they have to conform to Purview. What that means is that Purview has its own names and for each element of retention rule. In its simplest form, a retention rule has three parts: a trigger, a retention period, and then an action, a disposition action at the end of the life cycle. Three elements. Purview has its own names for each of those three elements, and you have to conform to those names. Now, one more detail on that is rules. When I say rules, I have two meanings of rules. One are retention rules. Those are the three-part rules: trigger, period, action. You'll probably have, let's say, 200 unique rules at most. Even if you were, let's say, 1,000 users, typically you would only have a couple of hundred unique rules. One example might be keep for 7 years and destroy. Another one might be keep for 10 years after the life of the asset and then destroy. So they're very generic. The second type of rules that you need to have are what we call content rules. Those are rules that determine which retention rule gets applied to which content in SharePoint. So those rules you had to write as well. And we find that there's an average of about 3 of those rules per category. Now, what's a category? In the retention schedule, a category is a business activity such as expense claims or fleet vehicle maintenance. Business activity means category, which means record series, which eventually will translate to a library or storage location in SharePoint. They all mean the same thing. So you're going to have to create about, typically in a healthy EDRMS, about 3 rules per category. And for an organization of 1,000 employees, you would typically have around 800 or so categories or business activities. So if we take 800, 3 rules per category, we end up with 2,400 content rules and roughly 1 to 200 retention rules. That's the work you have to build inside Purview Records Manager. And you have to do it the way Purview needs it done. And this screen shows the way it has to be done. So you have to convert your retention schedule into a modern software-ready retention schedule, machine readable. We have a full 1-day training course just on how to do that alone. Number 3, you'll need a proper or suitable SharePoint information architecture. What is the IA, or information architecture? It's the answer to this question. Where do we store our stuff in SharePoint? Where do we store it? Well, they're in locations called libraries. So how many libraries do we need? What do we call them? What about metadata? Well, we're going to have descriptive fields of metadata assigned to every document in SharePoint. What metadata? How much metadata? Turns out that in a healthy EDRMS, there are an average of about 14 metadata fields per library. And it has 2 layers of metadata, which we'll get to later. But take a look at this diagram for a minute. A modern EDRMS, a compliant EDRMS, has 3 layers. Layer 1 is the retention schedule, which supports the whole pyramid. Layer 2 or stage 2 is SharePoint information architecture, which is how is it organized to reflect the business activities going on. And the third layer is the rules-based record keeping, what I call RBR. That's the Purview retention rules plus the content rules, roughly 2,400 content rules and 100 retention rules. And those rules automatically act on all the content in all of these libraries in SharePoint 24 hours a day. So once this is up and running, all three layers are locked tightly together to each other like Lego blocks, and you can't disturb it. So the information architecture is built once, it stays that way. Now, a key part of that is metadata, and a key part of metadata is SharePoint adoption. Sadly, I hear too many stories of how people don't like SharePoint. Well, my belief is this, is that if there's a poor SharePoint adoption, that means there's been a poor deployment. But the other way, the secret to a successful SharePoint deployment is a proper information architecture, which in turn means suitable metadata. Okay, so metadata is the key. Now, in a healthy EDRMS, as I said earlier, we find an average of 14 metadata fields per library. Now, I know what you're thinking. Who the heck wants to fill in 14 metadata fields every single time they put a document into SharePoint? Nobody. So the good news is that users only fill in, on average, about 2.1 of those 14 fields. So we have our cake and we eat it too, right? We have 14 metadata fields, which is fantastic for retrieval, but the users only have to fill in 2 of them, which makes the experience of uploading documents much, much simpler. And on the screen here, you'll see 2 examples, one for expense reimbursement and one for fleet vehicle maintenance. But just look at how different the metadata is for each one. That's what makes SharePoint successful. Suitable, appropriate metadata, and enough of it. And I just realized I have a typo in approved by. Never saw that before. Number 5, disposition. That's the end game of modern record keeping. Disposition is the act of pressing a button and destroying millions and millions of documents in accordance with the retention schedule. That's the whole goal of modern record keeping, is to destroy records appropriately. Now, the problem with disposition in Microsoft Purview RM is that it breaks all the rules. How? Well, remember, a rule is a rule is a rule. If the rule for audits is audit end date plus 10 years and destroy, well, that's the rule. But when you run disposition in Purview, it has a review process, which we would normally do. And the review process says, okay, if you approve that rule, we're just going to blow these records away right here, right now, as soon as you approve it. That violates compliance because the records manager must have the final word over what gets destroyed because they have to be accountable for it, document it, and prove it, even in court if necessary. So that's violation number 1. The other violation is that the reviewer, when reviewing the records at the end of their life cycle, can say, no, I don't like it, change it. Make this one shorter, make this one longer. You can do whatever you want. That's another violation because that's not why the rules are there. The rules are there to be followed, not to be changed. So basically the process of disposition removes the records manager from their job. It takes all the accountability away from them. So we can't have that. So what we advocate is a workaround, which fortunately is easy to do, very simple, very straightforward, and that's what you're going to have to do in Purview for disposition. Now, we're 5 through. We're 5 deep so far out of the total. We're almost halfway there. But I thought I'd mention this while I think of it, which is training. If you like what you hear so far and you're interested and you need to move faster than waiting 14 weeks to learn all this, then feel free to sign up for our training. We have private training and public training. All the details are at the link below. And might I point out that I deliver the training? I know what I'm talking about when it comes to records management. I have the certification and I have the experience. So training from me is not what you see on typical YouTube videos. It's not just a feature walkthrough from someone trying to sell you the software. I am not selling you the software. I am not a Microsoft partner. I'll tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly and how to deal with it all. Number 6, retention policies. That's kind of the core of Purview RM. The problem with retention policies is they compete with retention labels. In other words, there are two ways to get rid of documents in Purview. One way is with retention policies, the other way is with retention labels. They're both do the same thing. Both of them can do this. 5 years after the trigger, delete. So why two? Well, retention policies don't follow the retention schedule. Retention labels do. Retention policies don't manage or treat the document as a record. Retention labels do. But here's the really bad news. If you are using them both at the same time, they compete with each other. So you end up with a nightmare scenario of all of these policies that are overlapping and or competing with retention labels. And guess what? You're going to have to sort all that out. It's virtually impossible. If you use the two together, you're headed for an administrative nightmare that I don't think you'll ever be able to wiggle out of. So my advice is do not use retention policies only for certain use cases, such as cleanup, where you're staying well away from records management. Number 7, the good stuff, retention labels. They're good. They are records compliant because they adhere to the retention schedule and they lock documents down. Why do we lock documents down? Well, lockdown is the principle of immutability. This is the basis of it. We say in the records world, documents must not be deletable by any users or editable. Why not? Because that disturbs them as evidence. It removes their value as evidence in any legal setting. We can't have people running around changing documents every day of the week. That's just not going to work. So we make them immutable for the duration of their life cycle until they reach the end of their life. That's one of the seminal principles of modern record keeping. So retention labels are the mechanism we want to use. But there are two ways to apply these labels to the documents. One is from users. Two is from automation, auto apply rules. Do not ever let users apply them, ever. Because again, we're back in that scenario where any user can choose any retention rule at any time for any reason and change it as many times as they want. That is not compliance. It's just not, okay? Compliance is these are the rules, we're all following them. Full stop. That's compliance, okay? So that means we have to put the records manager in full control of those assignments of retention rules. And the only safe mechanism in Purview RM to do that are auto apply policies. And we'll get into all the details in the video tutorial number 7. Number 8. So you've been using Purview for a year. Are you compliant? Well, how do you know if you're compliant or not? There is a way, and that way is called a CAR. That's the classification accuracy rate. If you have 1,000 users, then in a typical modern EDRMS, you'll end up with roughly 12 records per person per day flowing into your system. That's 12,000 a day. That's almost 4 million a year. So let that go on a couple of years, and then you want to do a disposition to blow away 2 or 3 million of them. Well, when you do that, no records manager will ever do it unless they have confidence that the classifications, which is the assignment of the rules, are correct. What's the threshold for correct that would allow you to do a disposition and have it stand up in court? 85%. In some instances, some businesses, it has to be higher. Some financial businesses, medical, nuclear, what have you. But generally speaking, for the rest of us, it's 85% or higher. Now, how do you know that it's 85% accurate? Well, you have to mathematically prove it. And there are ways to do it. And in topic number 8, we'll show you how to do that. Number 9, this is the ninth thing you have to know about Purview RM. Um, the whole idea of records management is to lock the records down so people cannot noodle around with them until they reach the end of their life and then blow them away. Now, in most organizations, about 5% or so, maybe 10%, are not blown away. They're kept forever, permanent, or transferred to an archive or somewhere. But generally speaking, our goal is to blow them away, mostly. So at the end of that life cycle, uh, they have to be intact. We have to prove, as and when necessary, that the record we're presenting in court or in a proceeding of any sort has not been altered maliciously or otherwise. How do we do that with digital records? You can't unless you can prove that they have not been deleted. So they have to become immutable. With Purview, it does make them immutable, a very appropriate thing. But you can unlock them and edit or delete them, even though they're immutable. That's a violation of compliance. We can't have that. So it started out as Microsoft attempting to please the users, but it went very bad very quickly. So fortunately, they gave us a way to disable that feature. It's really important that you not allow editing of immutable records. Number 10. Now, this is the biggest single challenge or problem with Purview record keeping. Did you know that 60% or more of all your records are what we call case records? Case records are records that have that are about a person, a place, an event, or a thing. And that means that the records are generated in adventures with a start and a stop, and each adventure yields a set of records unique to that adventure. For example, projects. You might have 3 projects, P1, P2, P3. Each one of them generates their own set of records different from and independently of the other 2 projects. You have to keep them separated. And each of those projects will end at different times. It's no different than records about employees. All the records about one employee are a different set of records or case than those about another employee, obviously. And each employee will have a different termination date. So my 3 favorite examples of case records are employee records, project records, and contract records. All 3 have that structure to them. The retention rule trigger is always going to be the event date. So each employee could have a different event dates. If you have 1,000 employees, you have 1,000 different event dates that you have to store and manage. So that shows that the handling of case records is a little more complicated than non-case records. But if you have 3 million records per year and 60% of them are case records, that means that 1.8 million of them are being handled with a different algorithm inside Purview. In order to get this right, you have to deal with that. So in Purview record keeping, this is a rather complicated process. It takes over 10 steps for every rule. Yeah, over 10 steps. And you need over 1,000 rules. So imagine going through 10 steps in a wizard or 2 in Purview RM for each particular rule. It's very, very complicated, and it's extremely technical. KQL, you have to deal with KQLs head on. Each rule, content rule, which is a rule that says in this place in SharePoint for these records, apply this retention rule to those records. That's what a content rule is, right? In SharePoint, or sorry, in Purview RM, they're called auto apply policies. And each policy has to have a query inside it that defines or calls out the records in question, the target records that the retention rule will be applied to. And you have to form that with a KQL, or keyword query language query. And that is close to a programming language. It's not a programming language, but you have to, it looks, feels, and acts like one. You have to craft these very careful sentences with careful syntax, and the spelling has to be perfect in order to for the rule to run properly. And you have to deal with refinable strings. What the heck is a refinable string? A refinable string is a representation of a piece of metadata in SharePoint. And that piece of metadata will be used inside the KQL query. For example, if library equals audit and a document metadata field or column called approved equals yes, then apply this rule, audit end date plus 5 years and destroy. That's a very typical plain vanilla content rule or auto apply policy. But it can't use the phraseology approved by. If you look on the SharePoint screen, it's right in front of you. Approve yes or approve no. Simple, yes, no field. But that won't work in a KQL query auto apply policy. You have to use a refinable string, which represents that piece of metadata. And guess what? You're going to need a lot of those refinable strings, but there's a small limit. And if you're large, you'll run out of those. And that means you come to the end of the road. You can't have as many rules as you need. That's an extremely severe limitation of Purview Records Manager. Very severe. I think that out of the box, you can probably get up to several hundred users. We use a little insider trick to get us up to maybe 1 to 2,000 users. But if you're 3,000 users, 4,000, 5,000 or higher, you are out of luck. You're going to have to do something different here. You're going to have to find a workaround, even if that means custom building something. From what I can tell, all large SharePoint deployments I've seen, I should have said Purview deployments. All large Purview deployments I've seen run into this. What do? Everybody does a different workaround. Some of those workarounds don't even work from what I can see. So it's complicated, it's technical, it's severely limiting, but it can be done. You just have to know what you're doing and how to do it. And we advocate not following the out-of-the-box process. We have what we believe to be a better process. That takes us to number 11, which is dealing with private and sensitive records in SharePoint. So Purview is all about compliance. And that compliance is not just record-keeping compliance. It's also compliance with privacy laws and legislation, like the Freedom of Information provincial statutes in Canada, the California privacy legislation in California, and I think we're up to 20-something states now in the US use that or something similar to it. And every day, more and more legislation comes out about privacy. So bottom line, in every single SharePoint library, you need 3 columns or metadata fields. Does this document contain personally identifiable information? Does it contain any sensitive information, such as a credit card number or a password or a bank account number or anything like that? What is the IPL, information protection level? Is it generally available to the public? Is it supposed to be kept inside? Or is it restricted to certain people? So we have to deal with that in all records. It's easy to do, as long as you have the metadata to handle it. But Purview, remember, is much bigger than the golf ball. It's a bowling ball. It has all kinds of features that you can bring to bear depending on how these documents were tagged with these 3 pieces of information. For example, if the document is, the information protection level is um, internal, which means it cannot be seen by the public, then you can mark it that way. And later, at any point in the document's life, if someone tries to email the document out, it won't work. Email will shut it down and say, oh, this particular document, it's not allowed to go outside your organization, so we're keeping it inside. We're not allowing it to be sent outside, so they remove it, and you cannot send it outside. If it was really sensitive, then the DLP, the data loss prevention features of Purview, can be used to encrypt it, for example, to only certain people. So this is just modern privacy management in an EDRMS. Almost done. Number 12, users don't like SharePoint. I hear that all too often. And my conclusion is this. When I hear that people don't like SharePoint, what does that tell me? That tells me that it hasn't been deployed properly. The two big complaints I hear all the time. Number one, it's too much work to put a document in SharePoint. All this metadata, it's annoying. Number two, we have millions of documents in here, but I can't find what I need. Guaranteed, those two complaints mean it hasn't been set up or structured properly. What we find is a lot of SharePoint in the wild, where every department has a green light to build all the libraries they want, build all the metadata they want, create thousands and thousands of folders, do whatever they want. That goes on every day of the week, and we call that SharePoint in the wild. And it is completely and utterly ungovernable. So the whole idea of an EDRMS is compliance. In order to be compliant, it has to be structured properly, and it has to be adopted by the users. So a proper deployment has a good, effective, useful, and usable information architecture, and it's strongly controlled centrally so that it doesn't grow and grow and grow in the wild. We can't have users inventing folders, inventing libraries, and inventing metadata. No, we can't have that. And of course, we have to have good training. So, bottom line is that the success of a SharePoint deployment, whether, for that matter, whether compliant or not, isn't determined by SharePoint. It's determined by how you deploy it. And number 13, preservation copies. What's that? Well, again, Microsoft's philosophy is that compliance comes from users, not from the organization. It's backwards and it's wrong. They want to do anything they can to please the users, which again isn't compliant with compliance, right? So if you have a locked down immutable record, you can delete it and edit it. Yeah. But what it does in an attempt to preserve compliance is it makes a secret copy online of the document when you delete it or modify it. So what happens here is you get duplicates of documents, a steady stream of duplicate records that you had to deal with at disposition time at the end of the life cycle. So there's many complications of this, many considerations, but just know that with Purview RM, you're going to have to deal with this. And our final topic, number 14, artificial intelligence. Do you need it? No, you don't need it to achieve record-keeping compliance. Are there use cases for it where it could be useful in a record setting? Yes, but few. There's two levels of AI in Purview RM. There are trainable classifiers, which is kind of old, dated technology, but it's free. It comes in your license. And then there's document understanding models, used to be called syntax. That's modern, better AI, but you pay extra for it. Neither one is needed to achieve compliance. Neither one, okay? And we're going to show you how to use it and what its limitations are and what its capabilities are. And at the end of the day, it will not help you achieve your 85% that you need as a minimum threshold to be compliant. So to wrap up, these are the secrets to a successful Purview deployment. Automate it. Do not put compliance in the hands of users. Do not. Number two is find and deploy good workarounds for the features that are not the best features. And the features that are actually anti-compliant, such as the disposition review, just avoid them completely. Avoid them completely. So you have to know what to avoid and what to take advantage of. And for event-driven, we recommend not even going with out of the box. We recommend a completely alternative method, which we believe to be more efficient, faster, more reliable, and it works consistently, and it's more sensible. So definitely we advise an alternative method for that. And we're here to tell you that you're likely to need technical assistance from your IT department. So that's it. We can help. We can help with training. We can coach. We can offer you coaching services for an hour, a block of hours, a day a week, whatever you need. And we can do consulting. We can help you deploy your project. We can teach you the software. And again, we don't sell this software, so we don't have a vested interest in Purview. We really don't. So we're going to not hesitate to say, guys, this is the way you want to do it, not that way. Okay? So there's a link down below in the description to take you right to our training courses. And that's it. So good luck with your Purview deployment. I hope you send us your email and we'll put you on that list for those 14 video tutorials. Thank you very much.